In this video, which is the second in a series on the role, if any, of Russia in end-time Bible prophecy, I will provide the true identity of the person known as Gog, who comes from the land of Magog. I will also prove, using scripture, that Gog is the same person we call the beast or the Antichrist. So, stay with me for a revelation of another great mystery. I will begin by quoting from the book of Ezekiel, which provides details of the person known as Gog. Ezekiel 39 verses 1 to 4, and I read, "Son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right hand. On the mountains of Israel you will fall, you and all your troops and the nations with you. I will give you as food to all kinds of carrion birds and to the wild animals." Here we find the God of heaven addressing someone whom he calls Gog, who comes from the far north. The Lord clearly indicates that he is against this king or prince, and that God himself will bring this king to fight against the nation of Israel. The reason why God will influence Gog to invade Israel is so that God himself will find a good reason to destroy this wicked king and his massive army. The prophet Isaiah also provides details of another person known as the Assyrian, whom God will send to fight against the nation of Israel towards the end of time. Isaiah 10 verses 5 to 7, and I read, "Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. But this is not what he intends. This is not what he has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations." As you will notice from the above scripture, when God sends the Assyrian to fight against Israel, he gives the men clear instructions on what is to be done against the nation of Israel. God will send the Assyrian to seize loot and to snatch plunder from the people of Israel and to trample the Israelites in the streets as punishment for Israel's ungodly behavior. But the Assyrian will go beyond what God intends and will instead try to destroy many people and many nations, as the prophet Isaiah indicated. The book of Ezekiel confirms that the Assyrian is the same person known as Gog, because when Gog attacks Israel, some nations of the world will ask him if he has come against Israel for the purposes of looting and carrying away plunder, the very same things that God sends the Assyrian to do against Israel. Ezekiel 38 verse 13, and I read, "Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all her villages will say to you, have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hoards to loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, and to seize much plunder?" The book of Daniel tells us that when the king of the north invades Israel and other nations of the world at the time of the end, his intention will be to loot and take away gold and silver. This shows that The king of the north, recorded in the book of Daniel, is the same person known as both Gog and the Assyrian. This is also the person we call the Antichrist, or the beast who comes from the sea, as recorded in Revelation chapter 13. Daniel 11 verses 41 to 43, and I read, "He will also invade the beautiful land. Many countries will fall, but Edom, Moab, and the leaders of Ammon will be delivered from his hand. He will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape. He will gain control of the treasures of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt, with the Libyans and Cushites in submission." The book of Ezekiel goes further to tell us that the wicked king known as Gog will come from a place which is in the far north and attack the nation of Israel. The reference to the far north is one of the major reasons why people associate Gog with the nation of Russia, which indeed fulfills the description of being located in the far north of Israel. I will quote again from the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel 38 verses 15 to 16, and I read, "You will come from your place in the far north, you and many nations with you, all of them riding on horses, a great horde, a mighty army. You will advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. In days to come, Gog, I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I am proved holy through you before their eyes." So we know that the evil king known as Gog will live in the land located to the north of Israel, in a country whose identity I will reveal in my next video. It is from this northern country that God will bring Gog out and lead him towards Israel in order that Gog may attack the nation of Israel. But how does God persuade or influence Gog to attack Israel? The book of Ezekiel answers the question for us. Ezekiel 38 verses 3 to 4, and I read, "This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army, your horses, your horsemen fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords." So God the Father will turn Gog around and put hooks in his jaws, so he can pull Gog out of the far north and drag him along, so that Gog can attack the nation of Israel. I will quote once again from the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel 39 verses 1 to 2, and I read, "Son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel." So, just as a fisherman does when he wants to catch fish, the God of heaven will use the nation of Israel as bait in order to catch Gog. When Gog responds to the bait, God the Father will pierce the jaws of Gog and drag him along, so that Gog can attack the nation of Israel. The fact that God will put hooks in the jaws of Gog is a critical piece of information which helps us to positively identify the person whom the Bible calls Gog. This is because only God and God alone can pierce the jaws of Gog with a hook and pull him out of his dwelling place, as the God of heaven explained to Job after Job had questioned the ways of the Lord. Job 41 verses 1 to 2, and I read, "Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook?" So there we have it. The one called Gog of the land of Magog is the same person known as Leviathan, the one whose jaws God will pierce with a fish hook. This Leviathan or Gog is the one we know as Satan the devil, or the ancient serpent who deceived Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The book of Isaiah provides more information on the identity of Leviathan, also known as Gog. Isaiah 27 verse 1, and I read, "In that day the Lord will punish with his sword, his fierce, great and powerful sword, Leviathan the gliding serpent, Leviathan the coiling serpent. He will slay the monster of the sea." So Gog is the same person known as Leviathan, who is also the monster of the sea. The book of Revelation describes this sea monster as Satan the dragon, the one who will soon be thrown down from heaven to live permanently on the earth in the land of Magog. Revelation 12 verses 7 to 9, and I read, "Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was held down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was held to the earth, and his angels with him." As the previous passage indicates, at the end of time, Satan the dragon will be thrown out of heaven to the earth after losing a war that will be fought in heaven. Upon landing on the earth, the devil or dragon, who is a spirit, will look for a physical human body to inhabit. That is why the dragon will be seen standing on the shore of the sea, looking for someone to possess, with the word sea referring to the wicked nations of the world, as the next passages indicate. Isaiah 57 verse 20, and I read, "But the wicked are like the tossing sea, which cannot rest, whose waves cast up mire and mud." Revelation 17 verse 15, and I read, "Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. Out of the wicked nations of the world, also known as the sea, will emerge an evil person known as the Antichrist or the beast, who will agree to worship Satan the dragon. In return, the devil will give his power, his throne, and his authority to the Antichrist or the beast, making the devil and the Antichrist one and the same individual, the person known as Gog, who comes from the land of Magog, which I will identify in the next video. Revelation 13 verses 1 to 2, and I read, "The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority." Now we know that Gog is just another name for Satan the devil, the ancient serpent known also as Leviathan, the wicked spirit which will enter into the body of the Assyrian and live on earth as the Antichrist. In other words, at the end of time, Satan the devil will live and walk upon the earth as a human being, as a person known as Gog, or Satan living in a human body. This is the man whom God will send to punish Israel for disobeying God's laws. In the next video, I will provide the name of the nation known as Magog, because the Bible tells us that Gog will come from the land of Magog, which many people believe incorrectly to refer to Russia. Such are the mysteries of God's holy word.